Hello, and welcome to my presentation on digital equity in rural Michigan. My name is Marielle Bush, and today's topic is going to be covering digital equity and digital inclusion for rural residents in the state of Michigan. This is a topic that is very important to me personally. As someone who works at a rural library in the south central part of the state, I can tell you that firsthand I have seen a number of the issues that a lack of digital equity brings to our patrons, and a number of different solutions that our library and other libraries have adopted to combat this issue of digital equity. So that is my brief note before we begin. Digital equity. What is it? Digital equity, as outlined by the National Digital Inclusion Alliance, is a condition in which all individuals and communities have the information technology capacity needed for full participation in our society, democracy, and economy. Digital equity is necessary for civic and cultural participation, employment, lifelong learning, and access to essential services. Briefly, to sum up this definition for our purposes, digital equity is therefore having access to any of the digital services that you might need to live your life fully or completely, whether that be access for education, for work, or even just access to the different resources now that everything is moving very much to an online format, both for things such as healthcare, but also for just government, daily news, all different areas. So who is most impacted in the field of digital equity and this lack of digital equity that we see in Michigan? Predominantly, digital equity is going to affect the people who don't have access to digital services. And for this presentation, I will mainly be focusing on the digital services that cover Wi-Fi or broadband connectivity. And this, for the state of Michigan, we will see laid out, is going to be mainly in rural areas where there is a very low population density. Some steps toward digital equity. Why is there a need? What makes this have urgency? Well, in a world post-COVID-19, we have seen a surge in the amount of people who work remotely and who depend on remote services. As of 2019, the percentage of Michigan workers who work remotely has tripled. Rural Michigan communities are seeing reduced educational and occupational prospects as a result of a lack of broadband access. In a world where, since 2019, we have tripled the amount of people who work remotely, there is, of course, going to be a lack of job availability if a person does not have broadband access. Furthermore, education. Schools in my area of Hillsdale County in particular, schools during the COVID-19 shutdown were loaning out Chromebooks, mobile hotspots to families so that students could complete their assignments online. Even since 2019-2020, schools in the area have had to shut down and have remote learning days due to different illnesses, due to resurgence of the COVID-19 virus. And this stands the test of time, that we are moving to a fully digital age, and it's urgent. It's urgent for Michiganders to come up with solutions to this need. That brings us to discussions for rural libraries. How can libraries affect change in this area? Why is this up for discussion in library information science forums, and why now? As mentioned previously, we're living in an increasingly digital age, particularly in a post-COVID-19 society. So it's important to provide access to digital services and break down the technological barriers that existed before and during the pandemic. ever since we've moved into this next century, and the invention of the iPhone, the World Wide Web, all of these late innovations of the 20th century and the early 21st century have really changed the game of how people work, how people live, how people get their news, and how people go about their daily lives. Most people nowadays are going to rely on digital access, or at least having it available at some point throughout the day. And that is why for libraries who are servicing these rural communities, they can really jumpstart this, and they are. In fact, as you'll see from some different library forums coming up, they are the ones who are on the forefront of this for those rural communities. To begin, let's talk about some statistics to break this down further. Here is a broadband internet map. It is the current map as of 2014 to 18 that shows households with a broadband internet subscription, and it breaks it down based on the percentage by county as color-coded on the right-hand side of the screen. Unfortunately, this is the current map that was available on the Mish-New Economy, and it is entitled the Broadband Internet Access. As you can see across the country, there are many areas, if we look on a national scale, that have a broadband internet subscription at 54.9% and under for their households. If we look at Michigan, we can see that very low numbers also exist in the state, especially in the southern part and again towards the upper western side of the state, where we're hitting numbers in the 53 to 64.9% of households who are covered by this broadband internet subscription. To have a detailed view of Michigan, you can see the statistics and the numbers that are available. There are 212,701 underserved households. That means people who are not necessarily having the proper access they'll need to internet availability. Areas with availability of 54.9% and under by county are shown, and as we saw on the previous slide, that is in areas of Michigan. There are also areas not covered by the detailed service area map, particularly in the Upper Peninsula, but even in the southern part of the state where you can see south of Lansing, there are areas that there are no statistics on according to this map. The question of digital equity does go hand in hand with affordability for access. So if we discuss affordability and access to digital inclusion through broadband, there are more than 212,000 households in our state that lack the opportunity to access a high-speed internet connection, and another additional 865,000 households that face barriers related to affordability, adoption, or digital literacy. Taken together, this means that approximately 31% of Michigan households do not have an affordable, reliable, high-speed internet connection that meets their needs. This is the most current statistic on the Michigan.gov webpage. I can tell you from a personal standpoint that this is true of my own situation. Up until this month of March, I actually did not have internet available through my cell provider, and I had to go to another company that did have a ability within my area because my current cell company did not have any towers or availability to put in an internet connection for me. So I was depending on my handheld mobile data plan and using my phone as my hotspot. This is something in our area I know a lot of people will come by to use the library for digital services, especially Wi-Fi. And again, having a reliable high-speed internet connection that meets those daily needs, especially in a world where there's so much remote activity and education, it's just uncalculable. I would like to move on to how the role of income is playing out in this field of digital equity. Over on the left-hand side of the screen, you will see a graph chart from the Pew Research Center that shows how Americans with lower incomes have lower levels of technology adoption. This here is laid out where the darkest color of blue is the income makers of less than $30,000, and the lightest blue progresses up to 100,000 or more for the yearly income. According to this graph, you will see across it that household income determines access. Accessibility is markedly higher in the groups that make $100,000 or more, and that is true in every category across the board. You'll see in smartphone usage, desktop or laptop computers, home broadband access, tablet computers, or even in every category as listed above. This is markedly higher as far as access or adoption in the category group that make 100,000 or more per year. Based on this, we can assume, as the Pew Research Center assumes, that lower income equals lower levels of technology adoption. Adoption being whether you are adding it to your daily life or just having the availability to add it. Therefore, digital literacy does have a direct correlation to income. And again, this latest chart is from 2023 that Pew has just put out. According to our national rates of the U.S. Census Bureau, they released a report from 2022 that shows Michigan's poverty rate now ranks 13th in the nation. The report says around 13% of the state lives in poverty, with the poverty rate increasing in 49 of 83 counties. Wayne, Mecosta, and Lake counties have the highest poverty rate at more than 20%. So if we are taking this chart in connection with these stats from just a little over a year ago, we can see that if poverty is increasing in our state, then our correlation that there will be lower levels of technology adoption is really urgent at this time in Michigan. There is a constant state of lower wages or inflation, and we're seeing as we move into 2024 that this holds true post-pandemic as well. To transition, how are libraries bridging this digital divide? What can we say libraries are doing to provide these digital services, this access especially to broadband for their patrons? Well, under digital services, this is a very big blanket, and again, for the sake of time in this presentation, I'm mainly focusing on the Wi-Fi compatibility issue. So libraries provide Wi-Fi, whether that be through the internet, the connection to the World Wide Web, whether it provide better access for cell service in their general vicinity, and if that in turn leads to access to email and other mobile services that patrons cannot utilize at home based on their rural areas, that is something that also falls under this Wi-Fi blanket. And again, mobile hotspots. Mobile hotspots are a newer concept that libraries have started to adopt, where they will be available for checkout for their patrons. Before I move on from digital services, I do want to touch on the technology point of the actual devices that outside of mobile hotspots that libraries make available for their patrons. This includes computers, printers, fax machines, and tablets. And these are things that many people, as we'll see, and as we've just seen, based on the poverty statistics in Michigan, many people are probably not going to be able to afford these and afford the maybe monthly subscriptions or costs that would come with having these in the home. And that is where libraries fill in. I'd like to note a library that's doing a fantastic job of being proactive. So on to libraries are being proactive on this issue. I want to highlight the Elk Rapids District Library. They are a library up near Grand Traverse Bay, and although rural, they are doing a fantastic job at increasing digital resources for their community and patrons. Some recent initiatives that their library has undergone include mobile hotspot checkouts for their area. They have increased their virtual programming, and they have also added Chromebooks for checkout. Now, these are all wonderful things for a rural community. Chromebooks are wonderful for children who are doing distance learning classes. The virtual programming is fantastic and phenomenal in a COVID, post-COVID world, and this again is from the Elk Rapids District Library as of 2022. So it's moving past pandemic, but still to a new age in libraries and library programming. And the mobile hotspot aspect is wonderful for libraries to be able to connect their patrons to the internet and allow them to get their work done, their classes done, whatever it may be. So how can a rural library, perhaps with a very tight shoestring budget, afford to make these advancements in their digital resources? Well, Elk Rapids District Library is specifically utilizing local, state, and government resources as part of this program. They've used the MI-83 Technology Libraries and Communities Grant, and they've also looked for library cooperative grants through their local co-op to help fill in the needs for these new services they're adding. This is a great lesson for other libraries to take who, again, may not have the budget to dedicate to these new advancements that are important. There are options out there, and it is something to keep in mind. Bridging the digital divide. Libraries are stepping up to cover a lack of resources for rural areas. And I would like to note that there is state programming available. So post-COVID, there have been attempts to instigate better Wi-Fi, particularly in rural areas. There's an Office for Michigan Broadband that is specifically used to increase broadband accessibility to rural areas. However, as of 2022, this office is incredibly understaffed and really not operating the way it was envisioned. You can check out Isaac Constan's article there at the bottom where he says that Michigan has a broadband office to get Wi-Fi, but it's sitting empty. Well, it's not exactly empty. Constance notes that it is hollow compared to how it was envisioned. Currently, 1 in every 8 Michiganders does not have any sort of internet access at home, and 1 more than that relies on their cell phone data plan as a source of internet access. Again, I can loop myself into that statistic. Up until recently, I was in the same boat where there wasn't an available option that would suit my needs to have reliable home internet. Continuing about how libraries are bridging this digital divide, I'd like to highlight again how library offerings are filling in these voids that are not available through state, government, or within community programming. So these mobile hotspots checkouts are wonderful. The computer, tablet, technology checkouts for patrons who might not even be able to afford to buy a home computer. Increased cell reception within the vicinity of library buildings will often boost service for patrons. Access to email and other mobile services from outside the library 24/7 if libraries have a public Wi-Fi available. That is a wonderful option. Also, libraries offer classes, workshops on using technology. This will even further bridge that divide and allow patrons, especially early education learners, so children, and also patrons maybe in the 65 and over category who are retired, who never had to use their digital expertise for work are now having to learn new skills just to find the information that is predominantly online now. Access for government services, researching health information, and enrolling in distance learning classes, and even starting small businesses are new emerging techniques that are evolving around digital services in this new century. And it's not a new concept that the digital web is a thing, but it's ever increasing in its urgency. And statistically, we can certainly see that based on COVID-19 in the post-pandemic world. Even as far back as 2005, there was data that showed 98.9% of all public libraries offered free public access to computers and the internet, which was a growth of more than 400% since 1996, when just 1 in 4 libraries did. So libraries have always been at the forefront of this battle for digital equity, and it is something that's ever increasing. Libraries are becoming increasingly creative in their approach to it. So community needs in a nutshell, these could be digital, where just having this access to computers, printers, fax machines for business and personal needs, this Wi-Fi access to allow patrons to have access to their mobile services, as well as library services for tax work, healthcare, Medicare, and other official business are all needs that a rural community might encounter falling under this digital services sphere. And libraries are there for them. Libraries are implementing and have been implementing programming and services for this particular purpose. Workshops and classes, again, are another area, just as Elk Rapids District Library noted in what they're doing with virtual programming. They are making things more accessible to their patrons, but there are also workshops and classes on utilizing technology, utilizing email. Our library has done this as well, where we have offered classes to do computer literacy, like 101, or emailing, and how to trust web pages, things like that. Even people who've never used keyboards and desktops, tutorials for that are immensely helpful, and oftentimes they're not going to get that for free anywhere but their local library. I'd like to also mention towards the end of this presentation how the American Library Association is weighing in on this topic. They did some recent statistics post-pandemic in 2021 and noted that library workers make technology more accessible for every person of every age in our communities, including students, job seekers, and the millions of Americans who still lack broadband access and skills. The new survey report details how our nation's public libraries serve as critical infrastructure for bridging digital divides, empowering lifelong learning, and advancing economic recovery. This is worthy of note to also mention that more than 88% of all public libraries offer formal or informal digital literacy programming. So as noted in the slide before, this is a immensely helpful aspect of library services that falls under this digital blanket. Final conclusions and further insights before I wrap up, I would like to reiterate that digital equity and this march for or advocacy for digital equity is a necessity in this modern age. We can see, based on the previous slides, that there is a growing need year by year, pretty much, that even post-pandemic, multiple communities are still without any digital representation or accessibility that they need. So it's growing in its necessity. Again, not necessarily new topic, but it is increasing in its urgency. And libraries are bridging these gaps in access to technology based on their services and offerings. Rural libraries in particular are reframing their services as a direct result of this need to accommodate communities with their digital offerings. Thank you very much for watching. All comments and questions are appreciated. I hope everything was very clear. But if there's anything that I could elaborate on, please feel free to leave me a comment or question to that effect. Here is my work cited. Unless footnoted, all images in the presentation were free to use without attribution through Canva. And feel free to check out the links for any of my sources for further reading. Thank you.